Ah, there she goes. Thanks, Margaret. Okay, let us share screen. This crazy computer. There we go. There we go. Okay, we are ready to rock and roll. So, just a reminder of the schedule. Today is Wednesday. So we didn't have a class this past Sunday on Tisha B'Av. Very good. So we're making up for that today. And then this Sunday, the 25th, we resume our regular Sunday schedule. Today, we're going to continue our study of Musar meditation and learn how it helps us rearrange our lives as part of becoming enlightened. Enlightened is a big word, popular word. We're focusing on the Jewish way of doing that, which probably is not too different than any other way of doing it. And we will focus on structured versus unstructured meditation. And then we'll continue the best practices of meditation and discuss how to deal with distractions, in particular lethargy. Okay, where are we in the overall map of looking at traditional Jewish modes of meditation? We are here looking at Ruach Hakodesh, or known as Enlightenment, which we're defining as transcending the physical through work on yourself. Transcending the physical. Okay. We've talked a lot about the physical as it's connected to the soul, and in particular, how it's relating to enlightenment or Ruach HaKodesh. We have this. We talked about death, and we talked about the experience of death, about how you live affects how you die, and what you do during the course of your life affects how you feel about how you lived when you're dying. And ideally, you'd be reflecting on that as you're living. So you're working on yourself. And Rabbi Kaplan outlined 10 steps or 10 personality characteristics that he maintains are necessary to develop as you work on yourself to become enlightened or to attain Ruach HaKodesh. And they are study, carefulness, diligence, cleanliness, abstention, purity, piety, humility, fear of sin, and holiness. Okay, now I'm sure that you're going to find other sources in other cultures that talk about slightly different personal qualities to develop, but we are kind of talking about the same thing here if you take the big picture. Okay, but this class is devoted to understanding how Jews have been doing it traditionally, and regretfully not in recent centuries, so we're trying to get back on track. Rabbi Kaplan in particular mentioned the Musar movement as a movement that was dedicated to promoting work on yourself. And we're going to learn a little bit more about that. We did a big inventory of what Musar is about. It's about self-perfection in all areas. And meditation, as we'll see, is a huge part of Musar methodology for working on yourself. Okay, for example, we talked a bit about how Rabbi Kaplan gave an example of using Musar meditation to rearrange your life. Okay, and this is what he said. He told us that the first part of the Musar program was to make a daily habit of reading a lesson from a classical Musar work. And there, we mentioned there are a few. One famous author of them is the Ramchal, and it's really enlightening stuff. It's really eye-opening stuff. I've actually read one of them. As the individual began to advance, the contemplation became a meditation. One would read from a classical Musar text on how to improve the ethical, moral, and religious quality of one's life, then meditate on this lesson for 20 to 30 minutes. This is a simple type of meditation similar to the one described in chapter 3, which we're going to be getting into, where I discuss meditating and how to rearrange your life. Okay, so it's important to consider a few things here. So first of all, you have a source to guide you, and it could be a teacher, but in this case, we're talking about classical books. And these books have teachings on how to improve your life ethically, morally, religiously. And the process is you read and then you think about this, what that means to you for a designated time, for designated days. And that is a meditation. That is a process of meditation using the guidance of teachers, personally or through books, who help you develop, who help you perfect yourself. Again, bearing in mind that perfection is a process, not an end result. Okay, so he gave the example, did Rabbi Kaplan, of rearranging your life in the sense that if you wanted to rearrange your room, you have a living room or a bedroom, and you want to think, we got to get the most out of the furniture. Maybe we want different flow, colors. You would put a lot of thought consistently over time into what changes need to be made in the room so that you're improving your experience living there or being in there. And you just take that same process on a larger scale and think about how you're going to rearrange your life. Okay. So this is where we're going to pick up. This is where we're going to pick up. This is what he says. We are right here. I have defined meditation as a controlled manner of thinking. That's a standard definition of meditation. Controlled manner of thinking. On the simplest level, you can decide to sit down for the next half hour and just think about one particular subject. Let's say you decide that for the next half hour, you will think about rearranging your furniture. As we just discussed, in your mind's eye, you might imagine how various arrangements would look and even plan how to move the heavier pieces. During that half hour, you will have been meditating on furniture arrangement. And I think it's important to recognize that is meditation. So when you are thinking in a focused way on a particular item, and it could be very lofty ideas, or it could be very down-to-earth ideas. In particular, do we need a red couch or a green couch or an orange couch or a black couch? You're doing that through meditation. And as he says, it's as simple as that. There need not be anything esoteric or mysterious about meditation. No special surroundings are required, nor must any particular body position be assumed. You could be like just sitting at the kitchen table, strumming your fingers. What kind of couch should I get? You're meditating. You could have meditated while walking around the block, while sitting back in your easy chair, or while relaxing in the tub. He, as a matter of fact, Rabbi Kaplan makes a bunch of references to being in the tub, meditating. He spends a lot of time in the tub. And he was a math genius, and he comes up with these great mathematical formulas sitting there in the tub. Okay. The very fact that for a specific time period, you were thinking about a specific topic rather than letting your mind wander at random makes it a meditative experience. And again, we have discussed on prior times a more free-flowing experience where you're letting your subconscious pop things up and you have to decide how relevant they are. That's different. And as we said last time, you really can't do that open-ended meditation until you become very strong at the closed-ended, very focused. Otherwise, you just lose yourself. Why? Because you still need the ability to focus. My subconscious just popped up and had me thinking about caterpillars. What's the reference? You have to retain, you have to have the skill now to think about the caterpillars and why your subconscious is pushing that into your consciousness. You still need that fundamental skill of focus. So important. Of course, it is not always that easy. What do you do when other thoughts begin to creep into the mind? Remember that the decision was to think about arranging furniture and nothing else in this example. If this meditation is actually going to be a controlled thinking experience, then you will need a technique to rid yourself of undesired thoughts. Yep, to focus. You might gently push the extraneous thoughts out of your mind or otherwise pull your mind back to the desired subject. Whatever method you use to keep your mind on the subject, in doing so, you will be developing the rudiments of a full-fledged meditative technique. That's why we, at the end of our classes, we say, focus on the breath. You're going to wander, just get back to the breath. That's the process that he's describing. I've also heard another technique where, let's say somebody's thinking about rearranging their furniture and they find themselves thinking about whatever, they tap their finger. Just like this. It could be on the table, it could be like this. And you're reminding yourself, get back to it. So you program yourself to remind yourself that you're deviating. Okay. And by the way, for those people around here who wear tefillin, that is a real function of tefillin. And that's a real function of tzitzit. You're wearing tzitzit all day, and they act as reminders, like, there's a Burger King. Sorry, I got my tzitzit on, can't go. This kind of stuff. Tzitzit perform the same function as that tap in that sense. Like, nope, get back on the path. Okay. Meditation on rearranging your furniture may be a trivial example, but suppose you decided to spend a half-hour meditating on how to rearrange your life. You might find yourself thinking about fundamental questions such as these. What do I ultimately want out of life? What gives my life meaning? What is the meaning of life in general? If I had my life to live over, what would I do with it? What ideals, if any, would I be willing to die for? What would bring me more happiness than anything else in the world? Now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 questions here. I don't think anybody would advise trying to tackle all 6 at once, spend, some time on each one type of thing, but you're choosing the larger questions now and how it fits into your life. You have probably already thought about these questions at some time in your life. However, chances are that you thought of them only briefly. Unless you have been involved in a discipline that encourages it, you have probably never spent a full half hour without interruption thinking about any of these questions. If you have never done so before, the first time may be very shocking. You may discover that you have no idea of what you perceive as your purpose in life. You may have never thought about the meaning at all. Indeed, after a half hour of pondering any of the above questions, you might decide that the question needs more than one session of meditation. You might decide to have a half-hour session once a week. To make sure that you continue, you may decide that at a certain time every week, you will spend a half-hour meditating on the purpose of life, as well as your own personal goals. You will then be on your way to developing a discipline of meditation. Now, this is a very common practice. First of all, in almost all traditional martial arts schools, there's an evening dedicated to what they call philosophy. Why are we doing this? That's a question. In addition, Thursday night is very popular for Mishmar. In Yeshivot, they have Mishmar where they are addressing the larger questions. Now, I'm not talking about like Hebrews learning where you're buddying up and learning Gemara. I'm talking about a dedicated, structured time in the calendar where you're addressing the larger questions, where the rabbi might give a shiur about creation or whatever, God, whatever it is, the larger questions. And that's what he's talking about. So you have your own mishmar or your own philosophy session, every Wednesday from 8 to 8:30, I'm going to think about the meaning of life. That's what he's talking about. After several weeks of such meditation, you will probably begin to notice yourself growing in a number of areas. You might decide to reevaluate the direction of your life and make major changes in your lifestyle. You might find yourself more secure in your dealings with others, more confident about how you are spending your time. You may also find that you are constantly gaining new insight into your own personality and motivations. That's key. He's basically saying that if you're somebody who doesn't usually address the larger questions about your life, which is a lot of people, and you start doing it naturally, that meditative process triggers you to make changes in your life. That's the power of meditation. This form of meditation. At this point, you might feel that once a week is not enough. You may decide to increase the frequency of your meditation to 2 or 3 times a week or even once a day. You will then discover why many schools of meditation suggest or require that meditation be a daily exercise. And my Kung Fu practice, it is, in one way, shape, or form. But you have to remember that if I decide to daven the Amida slowly, with let's say 3 or 4 seconds before each word, I'm filling my daily requirement of meditation. Because as we discussed, the Amida was designed as a meditation. So, but you have to figure on the mix. I mean, seated meditation, when you're just really trying to clear your mind, really go deep, is necessary. So you can't get too scattered by each day saying, well, maybe today I'll do seated, and then tomorrow I'll do walking, and then Thursday I'll do the Amida. You know, you've got to have a schedule, and never forget the fundamentals. You always need to be able to develop the skill of one-mindedness. Why? Because even when you're using the Amida as a meditation, if you don't have the skill to stay with that, then you're gonna Baruch, and then you're gonna be, oh yeah, Atah. You don't want to get into that. You still need to be able to have that skill to focus. That's why the seated meditation, and Bhante, he says this all the time, the seated meditation is basic, and other stuff gets built on top of that. Okay, including specifically Jewish meditations, which like the Amidah. And by the way, other cultures would be doing the exact same thing as we're doing with the Amidah, only with their text. It's not like meditating on a text deliberately is a Jewish thing. And Kaplan says that right off the bat. He goes, we're all doing the same kind of stuff. Okay, and here's where Rabbi Kaplan takes off, where we're going to have to wrestle with this. As you continue to explore what is most meaningful to you, you may come to a point where you feel that you are reaching a new threshold. You may find yourself pondering not only the meaning of your own life, but the very meaning of existence in general. At this point, you will have discovered God. You will have discovered God by pondering the big questions. That's how he says you discover God. Before discussing this further, it is important to define God. Remember, this is like, as we hold, this is for our understanding. When we say we're defining God, you can't really define God, but for our purposes of understanding what we mean when we say God, we're defining God. We often think of God as being out there, far away from the world, but it is important to realize that God is also in there, in the deepest recesses of the soul. Here are 2 ways in which a person can discover God. First, a person can reflect on questions such as these. What is beyond space and time? How did the world come into existence? Why does the world exist? What came before time? By pondering such questions, a person can find God, but he will find God only in the sense that God is out there. And again, the best way I could relate to this is you get a sense of what you're talking about. It's not like a library scientific definition. You get a sense of what you're talking about. It's like when Moshe Rabbeinu reached out to God, give me something to work with, and he saw God from the back, this kind of thing. It's not like God said, well, here I am. No, you kind of got like a back sense of it. The second way in which one can find God is by delving deeper and deeper into the self in the matter discussed earlier. Here one also finds God, but one is finding himself in the sense that he is also in there, meaning, who am I? Who am I? What is my life about? What is meaningful to me? And he's saying that as you go inward and you try to understand yourself better, you're also getting a sense of God, because that place, so to speak, that you go to get to know yourself better, God's there too. This twofold manner of discovering God is related to the Kabbalistic concept that God both encompasses and fills all creation. When we say that God is above all things and beyond all things, we are speaking of him in the sense that he encompasses and defines all creation. This is the concept of God as being out there. However, in another sense, God is very close to us, closer than the air we breathe, closer than our very souls. And in this sense, he fills all creation and is in there. Okay, so this is really advanced in a way, and we're dealing with ideas that you can't really try to reconcile logically. How can God be out there and then here? You got to put the logical thinking aside for this and kind of back into it and say, okay, we understand conceptually kind of, but what is it? So to try to bridge the gap, this is what he says. Once a person discovers God in this manner, he might want to transform his meditation into a conversation with God. If one discovers God as the ultimate depth of one's being, then the way to relate to this depth would be to relate to God. At this point, one's meditation into the meaning of existence might become a silent conversation with God. So this is I think this is really clever, because this is his technique. What he's really saying is, we have a conceptual model which is not logical, which has a contradiction, which is, how could God be here and here? So what he's saying, okay, let's bring the idea down into familiar terms. What is the key human way to make sense of something and to make it familiar? You talk to it, you talk about it, you have a conversation with it. That's where he's landed, to bridge that gap and to get to a point where, all right, I don't have to wrestle with this thing logically because I'm going to fry my brain. Let's just bring it onto common ground, familiar footing. So you start a conversation with this amazing being who's out there and in here at the same time. You kind of bypass the logical contradiction, say, I want to relate. Let's use the other part of our brain and relate to this thing. It is significant to note that according to the Medrash, this is exactly how Abraham's career began. First, Abraham began to contemplate the meaning of life and existence, and it was in this manner that he discovered God. And the Rambam talks about, he talks about this Medrash, about, he actually he puts the reed in Abraham's brain. It's like, wait, is it the sun? Is it the moon? But who's behind the sun? Somebody had to make the sun. Like the whole thought process that Abraham Avinu went through, kind of thing. And Rabbi Kaplan, as he describes it, that's how Abraham discovered God. He goes, whoa, there's this super being out there. Abraham then began to have a dialogue with God. And Abraham's experience can be seen as a paradigm of how to begin a relationship with the divine. And again, what we said last time was, what's interesting about the Torah is that the Torah plugs us into this conversation that Abraham had with God, but we don't get we're not privy to the give and take. A lot of times we're privy to God's end of it. God says, Abraham this, God says that. So we don't have the give and take. And for whatever reason, the Torah just gives us, snapshots of it. But that's the process that was going on. Abraham's having a conversation. Again, the problem of extraneous thoughts may arise. One way to help alleviate this problem is to speak to God out loud rather than just in the mind. One would then be speaking to God orally. So he's saying, so if you just have a silent, you think, you're talking to God inside your mind, and then all of a sudden you're getting distracted. He goes, if you say it, it'll help you have more control over your thinking, and you won't get it distracted as much. Using oral conversation as a meditative technique is an ancient Jewish practice, documented in a number of important texts. In particular, it was a technique stressed by Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. And there's a whole chapter on that. Rabbi Nachman was famous for this. Okay. There are three important things that could be said about this type of meditation that we're describing, that we're talking to God. One, it is a verbal type of meditation and involves words in thought or speech rather than images. So what you're focusing on is what you're saying, not like a candle or breath or something. Two, it is inner-directed. The entire form of the meditation comes from within the person rather than being determined by an external stimulus. Like an example of that is the Amidah. That is a meditation, the words for which are proscribed by Chazal, and that's what we follow. Here, it's coming out of you. And three, it is unstructured. When the person sits down to meditate, he has no preconceived notion of what direction the meditation will take. God, I'm here. I want to talk to you. It's been a day. What a day. It's coming out of you. You're reflecting. But some people find an unstructured meditation too loose. In order to put structure into your meditation, you can write out an agenda. You may decide that every day for a given period of time, say a week, you will meditate on one subject. Then you will go to a second subject for the next week. Thus, if you are meditating on how to reorder your life, you might decide to spend 1 week meditating on your relationship with your spouse, a second week meditating on your relationship with your children, and then 2 weeks meditating your career. So come August, it's like, okay, God, for the first week of August, I'm going to talk to you about my relationship with X. And then for the second week, every day that week, I'm going to talk to you about my relationship with Y. And then the third week in August, I'm going to talk to you only about my career. And you put it down on the calendar. That's a structured way, because you're setting an agenda as opposed to sitting down and saying, all right, God, let me just tell you what pops up. Okay. As soon as one sets up an agenda meditation, it becomes a structured meditation. Of course, a meditation can be loosely structured or tightly structured, again, depending on what one wishes to accomplish. Meditating with an agenda is a practice favored by the Musar schools in Judaism. This form of meditation is especially effective when one wants to perfect one's habits or one's way of life in general. Okay, so from the Musar point of view, like the Ramchal has chapters in these books. You say, all right, we're going to study chapter 1 this week, then chapter 2, and you stay with that specific text for that specific time. Another way to add structure to your meditation is to use a biblical verse as the object of meditation. You could take verses randomly from the Bible or seek out verses that apply to the subject of your meditative interest. It is possible to make the entire meditative session for a day, a week, or a month revolve around that verse. Your goal would still be to rearrange your life, but you would be trying to do so in the context of that biblical verse. The verse could also form the basis of a conversation with God. So now that's kind of elaborate. So let's say you wanted to focus on men and women, and it's like, so God created man and women, he created a pluralistic, what is that? God, I want to talk to you about that. So part of the study is reflecting on the meaning of the verse. Part of that is using commentaries to understand the verse. So you could have a whole structure of study or some of it's conversation. Hey, God, what did you mean by that? And the other part of it is using reference materials. Okay. The method of basing a meditation on a verse, known as Girashin, was used by the mystics of Sfad in the 16th century. Though the method was used extensively, the text provides few details. It appears that a number of ways are possible. Let me just check the time here. Actually, we're going to pick up, because I don't want to, last week we got to bypass the best practice of meditation. I'm going to pick up next time on this meditation on a biblical verse as a way of improving yourself. Remember that the whole context of this is with Musar meditation, you are trying to become a better person and develop specific personal qualities that help you become enlightened, or as we say, attain Ruach Hakodesh. So the selection of verses has to be related to self-improvement. Okay, we're going to pick that up, like I said, on coming this Sunday. Okay. So let's see what Bante has to say. Lethargy. Okay, this has to do with dealing with distractions. Right here. Lethargy comes in various grades and intensities, ranging from slight drowsiness to utter torpor. We are talking about a mental state here, not a physical one. Sleepiness or physical fatigue is something quite different, and in the Buddhist system of classification, it would be categorized as a physical feeling. Mental lethargy is closely related to aversion, in that it is one of the mind's clever little ways of avoiding those issues it finds unpleasant. Lethargy is a sort of turnoff of the mental apparatus, a dulling of sensory and cognitive acuity. It is an enforced stupidity pretending to be sleep. You know, we say people are lethargic, and that's what he's describing. This can be a tough one to deal with because its presence is directly contrary to the employment of mindfulness. Lethargy is nearly the reverse of mindfulness. Nevertheless, mindfulness is the cure for this hindrance too, and the handling is the same. Note the state of drowsiness when it arises, and note its extent or degree. Note when it arises, note how long it arises, and when it passes away. Know how long it lasts and when it passes away. The only thing special here is the importance of catching the phenomenon early. You have got to get it right at its conception and apply liberal doses of pure awareness right away. If you let it get a start, its growth will probably outpace your mindfulness power. When lethargy wins, the result is the sinking mind or even sleep. That's pretty strong. And it's pretty strong for him to say that how this is like the anti-mindfulness, and that you have to really assert waves of mindfulness on it to get rid of it, and that you have to catch it early, otherwise you might be stuck. But as he says, the importance of it is taking the step back and saying, up, there I am being lethargic, up, there I am starting to slip, up. You know, you say these things to yourself, and you then become aware that you're doing it, and that's how you're initiating mindfulness at that moment, and its power diminishes. The more power you assert, the less power that state of mind has. So that's a big one. I particularly am not that familiar with it, but I know it's very popular and very common. And he also brings up something else that's interesting, which is that this whole process of becoming aware and applying mindfulness to the distractions, that's essential to the meditation, is a skill that's applied outside meditation, meaning that, you know, you have something, you're in a bad habit, up there I am interrupting again, or there I am getting distracted again, or there I am not listening to that person again. You're applying mindfulness to the habit or to the action that you want to change, as opposed to like, oh man, there I am not listening again. It's like, oh, I'm not listening again. Oh, I'm not listening again. Oh, I'm not listening again. The more you become aware of it, the more control you get, and the less this hold it has on you. And you could do that with anything that's taking you off track from what you're supposed to be doing. Okay. That's an earful. So we're going to meditate and then address some of the questions that I know everybody has. So we're going to stop the share. All right. And Margaret, will you please